Okay. Gillian Lynn Katz was born in South Africa and immigrated to the United States as a teenager in the 1960s. She grew up in the apartheid era and has written and published extensively on this subject. She recently published her poetry book, Portrait, with Kelsey Books. She also published a chapbook, Kaleidoscope, with Finishing Line Press. She won second place in the Greenberg Poetry Contest in 2012 and has been published in Inkwell, Westchester Review, Epiphany, Italics Mine, and other journals, and in anthologies, Magnum Opus 2019, Austin International Poetry Festival 2017, Best Emerging Poets 2017, Across the Long Bridge 2006. She has a Master of Arts in Writing from Manhattanville College and a Bachelor of Arts in Literature from Purchase College. She has taught creative writing and poetry to teenagers at the Scarsdale JCC in their summer arts writing program. Mrs. Katz is currently working on a novel about her experience of culture shock in combining American and South African culture into her psyche as a teenager. Please welcome Gillian Katz.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm so happy to be here. I remember the last time I came, I read in 2017, and we got lost coming, and it was in the middle of the night. And today it was raining, so it's kind of easier to do this from, this is my office where I do my writing. So welcome everyone, and thank you for coming. I visited my home country, South Africa, 2 years ago and toured Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela spent 18 of his 27 years in prison. My first two poems are based on the observations I made when I visited Mandela's jail cell. Inside Mandela's former penitentiary, a single oleander inside gray stone prison walls, a flash of pink blooms in clusters, deep green leathery land-shaped leaves arranged along the stems in whorls. I wonder, did you witness the ache of this poisonous plant when you were ordered not to sing as you cut the snow-white rocks in the lime quarry? Robben Island. Nelson, I walked where you walked for 3 hours inside gray cement walls where you chopped snow-white quarry stones in the heat, Mandela, on the windy prison island surrounded by the sea. Swaths of black kelp meandered in the ocean, floating free, like you wouldn't be, Nelson. I stood outside your cell, Mandela, 4 square meter circumference, where you spent 18 of your 27-year sentence. You slept on a straw pallet on the stone floor, brown blanket, small green table, red bucket with a lid. Your walls and door were steel see-through bars. More prince than prisoner, dressed neatly in prison clothes, leaning on a spade. You sealed your scrolls, buried them in tin cans in a small garden with only an aloe bush surrounded by gray cement walls. This next poem is about the military crackdown in Rohingya with the Muslims by Myanmar's armed forces and police. Rohingya. Tens of thousands displaced by monsoons, wade waist high through sludgy waters. Migration from Myanmar, escaping terror. Groups of men gathered like grapes, grasp bottles of water. Women sit on stones in a semblance of saris. A cluster of children claw tin and plastic bowls like hats doffed in supplication, waiting for their daily dose of sustenance. 1 of every 115 people on the planet is a refugee, and one day, sir, it could be you or me. And I wrote this poem before the pandemic. So when I wrote could be you or me, it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but now I'm not so sure since the pandemic. My younger daughter visited Israel and made some comments to me that inspired this next poem. Birthright Trip. My daughter stands on the Golan Heights, the Israeli side of the mountain. Tourists sip espresso at the nearby cafe with a large welcome sign. She photographs the grassy greenery adjacent to Syria and the cracked brown ground of the accursed country. Hears gunshots every few seconds. Her guide informs the group of college kids from many lands that each loud sound is a mother, a father, someone's child being ripped apart by bullets. And on a lighter note, this poem was inspired by my walk with lions when I visited South Africa 2 years ago at a reserve called Botlierskop. I walked with 2 female lions at the reserve in Mossel Bay. Each of us carried a clubbed stick. We're told never to turn our backs towards the beasts. When the lions stopped to rest, the guide photographed us one by one with our own iPhones. The Xhosa tribesmen held my hand all the way up the rocks so I could perch behind the resting giants. The guide tapped the ground with a long stick to indicate the place where I should stand, far back, so his compatriot could land the perfect portrait. And this next poem, I think, is very fitting for these divided times that we are living in. And it's called Natural Religion. If I were called to construct a religion, I should make use of nature. Going to church would entail a gathering in gardens to have each person hold a brightly colored flower, examine the perfection of petunias. How God in all his glory gifted us with perfectly petaled, glorious gardenias. The quintessential quietness, the light breath of breeze caressing our countenances, the soft summer sun encircling our shoulders. Peace and understanding would not be woven into our psyches with words of wisdom, but imparted with the purity of the perfection of creation. We would not need to be pardoned from sins towards mankind. We would expand our vision with the vitality of naturalness and the beauteousness of the bounty of nature. Nature stands there in all her glory, quietly, comfortably, beautifully. I would bow to the bougainvillea, and we as mankind, with all our choices, would choose to hold hands together and sing Kumbaya. We would sing and dance the garlands of nature encircling our necks. Know somehow that if we could imitate the immaculate imagery of God's imagination, there would be no need for wars and creeds or carnal deeds. We would just look into each other's eyes and be. In this final poem, I capture the nostalgia I still feel for my home country after decades of living in America. Scarsdale. A golden girl, I picked lavender jacaranda blossoms that tumbled onto Johannesburg grasses. As a pink-collared working woman, I watched white dogwood flowers cover the Tarrytown trees in masses. Now, as flame-colored azaleas burst forth every Scarsdale spring, I still feel the thunderclap, the cloudburst that blew a flower petal across 2 continents. And all these poems are in this book that was just published. And that picture on And there is me at 18 months. So thank you. It's been a privilege to read for you. And I look forward to hearing the rest of our participants tonight. Thank you.
I'm having a war of the okay. Thank you, Jillian. I'm so glad you got a chance to read for 10 minutes because I've heard like one poem each year, but I think it was very nice to hear a larger amount of poems.